Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll begin with a few minutes, as we give a moment for some more folks to join. All right, well, welcome everyone to today's Wednesday webinar hosted by the Institute for Hunger Research and Solutions at the Connecticut Food Bank and Food Share. We're really excited to have you today to hear a little bit more about one of our signature programs, More Than Food. We ask that if you have questions today to please enter them in the chat box, and we are recording the webinar. I'll hand it off to Katie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're thrilled to have you here today. We had over 250 people register for this webinar, which is just really, really exciting and shows how many of you are interested in addressing root causes of hunger. If you've ever asked yourself, there must be a better way to do this work, or we keep seeing the same people over and over again, we want to find some more holistic approaches, you are in the right place. And as Brittany mentioned, our Institute for Hunger Research and Solutions, the goal is to serve as a resource for food banks, food pantries, and other community partners. And if you haven't done so already, we would strongly encourage you to subscribe to our Institute at foodshare.org/institute. So you can get our monthly newsletters and see about our other upcoming webinars and to get other updates. I am thrilled to introduce you all today to two colleagues that I've been working with for the last several years. They're fantastic. You're going to hear from them soon. Jess Sanderson is the Director of Initiatives at Urban Alliance, which is located in East Hartford, Connecticut. And Jen Kruger is Deputy Director of the Johnny Cake Center for Hope, which is located in Peacedale, Rhode Island. And they're going to share their firsthand experiences with offering more than food in food pantry settings and building capacity in food pantries. Just as some context, and just so you know, I'm not tone deaf to what the reality is on the ground, we very much recognize that we're still in a pandemic. These are not normal times. We are, all of us, still recovering, adjusting, pivoting to this global public health emergency. And this is, a new reality for all of us. My hope is that even though we're still on a bumpy road, that many of you are starting to look forward down the road a little bit to how you can reinvent, reimagine how you operate your food pantries, how you focus on longer term solutions within your programs. So just so you know, this is within the context of a pandemic, but hopefully looking forward. As we focus on a pandemic and as we focus on food insecurity in our communities, one of the things that I think is very common is the scarcity mentality. And this is when we focus on not having enough, whether that's not enough food, not enough money, resources, time, volunteers. I hear very frequently from food pantries who say we don't have enough space, not enough equipment, a focus on lack, a focus on scarcity. And when we're focused on lack, and particularly when there are so many people in our community that need food, and we've all experienced the increase in food insecurity during COVID, it's very logical and easy to stick in the mentality of we should just focus on providing food. We just need to make sure that we provide food as quickly as possible to as many people as possible and stick with the status quo. While that can be tempting, it holds us back from longer term solutions. One way that I describe this is that the way we define a problem defines our solutions to that problem. So if we define our problem from a scarcity mentality, that there isn't enough food, the reason that we have food insecurity is there isn't enough food, then the solution typically becomes focused almost entirely on collecting and distributing more food, and often doing it as quickly as possible to as many people as possible. We've done a really, really good job of that as a nation. In our national charitable food system of food banks and food pantries, we are very efficient at providing food to individuals. However, if we define the problem of food insecurity in the United States of America as not just about food, but about poverty, stagnant wages, underemployment, lack of access to healthy, nutritious food, unaffordable health insurance, housing, childcare, and other systemic inequalities, then our solutions become much more complex and more holistic and hopefully more coordinated, because it's hard to tackle these more complex scenarios on our own. Even before COVID, for many of us in the charitable food system, we would focus on emergency food. And I would argue that it's time that we change the way that we provide charitable food so we can start to move from an emergency mindset towards empowerment. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is this shift. So when we move away from scarcity, we start to believe in abundance, and we think about an abundance mindset, seeing the strengths, the hopes and dreams in the people that we serve and recognize that they have assets to share, but also seeing the strengths and assets in our own organizations. And even though we may not have all of the resources on our own as an organization, if we collaborate with other community partners, we can probably pool resources and make a bigger impact. This is where collaboration is so important, building relationships so that we can have a collective impact that's more holistic. And this is the premise of our More Than Food program initiative, and it stems from the belief that it takes more than food to end hunger. And just briefly, a short history of our More Than Food initiative. It started over a decade ago with the Fresh Place program in Hartford, Connecticut, which is an innovative food pantry. We conducted a randomized control trial study of people coming to Fresh Place compared to people going to traditional food pantries. We found really significant differences, that people who went to Fresh Place had improved food security, self-sufficiency, diet quality compared to people going to traditional food pantries. We published findings in some research articles. We created a training manual website. We began replicating this model in additional food pantries in Greater Hartford, Connecticut, in Texas, and in Rhode Island. We've continued to scale this model with other food pantries, continued to evaluate these programs. During COVID, we pivoted and we've created an economic shock pilot project to provide virtual coaching to folks who've experienced an economic shock. We continue to learn from these programs. We continue to revise our services. This is part of a paradigm shift to help build the capacity in food pantries to more effectively address the root causes of why someone may be struggling with food insecurity in the first place. And we call this our 3 C's. And we focus on choice, allowing people to choose their food with dignity, focusing on healthy, nutritious choice. At the heart of this and the glue that keeps it together is culture. We're going to talk about that a lot today, of how you create a welcoming, dignified, empowering culture in your food pantry setting, and connection. Making strong connections and building relationships with individuals who come to food pantries, but also connecting with other community resources, programs, and services. Just very briefly, talking about choice. This is where, in a food pantry setting, there are multiple different ways to allow customers to choose their food like they would at a grocery store. I know during this pandemic, most of this has gone on the back burner. We're going to be doing a webinar next month in May about offering client choice. Hopefully, many of you are starting to think about how you can reintroduce choice in your food pantries. We'll also talk about some new innovative ways to offer choice that have come about since the pandemic. So more to come on that. And now I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Jess, who can talk more about culture.
Thank you, Katie. And so I'm going to share about culture and connection. And so when we talk about culture, we're talking about creating an environment that's welcoming and respects the dignity of each client. And so culture, it's not as much what happens as much it is how it's happening. And in retail, we might use the term customer service to describe this. And I'm sure we can all draw on past experiences that we've had receiving services. And we can think of times when we have received excellent customer services, and we can think of times when we didn't. And it's important, empathy is a really important concept when we talk about culture. And to consider, how did it make you feel in those situations when you did not receive high quality customer service? And culture, this is an important concept for all types of programming. It's particularly important at food pantries. Whenever a person is seeking any type of support for a human service need, we know that that can be a very vulnerable experience. And people seeking support from food pantries, they're often struggling with food insecurity and significant life stress. And culture it's complex to create a strong culture because it's not just things that a program does, it really involves internalizing values and beliefs about the people served, about the programs offered. And then after these values and beliefs have been internalized, it's expressing them in the context of programming. And we know that it makes a tremendous difference when services at pantries are offered in a way that's characterized as strength-based, welcoming, hospitable. What a difference it makes when someone walks in and they're greeted or someone smiles at them. Relational and empathic, helping people to help themselves. We really want to address the crisis needs, but also help people develop and set and accomplish their own personal goals. And trauma-informed is always very important, but even more so right now in the context of COVID. And so these are values and models that we want to see expressed in pantries. And as they are internalized and expressed in programming, a program or a food pantry can strengthen their culture. And the last thing I do want to say about culture is creating a welcoming, dignifying culture. It's not something that happens because just the leaders alone think it's important. Strengthening culture really involves instilling values in the entire team of staff and volunteers. And so first, it does need to be modeled by the leaders, those in leadership positions, but often we found that it's the strongest when there's training and just time where staff and volunteers can come together and talk about these things and learn about them together so that the values are internalized. And these are just some images that just demonstrate strong program culture. We know, of course, as I said, there's values that need to be internalized, but then strong relationships with people served is tremendous. And even physical environments, there's ways that you can set up a program or the process and procedure for how your program operates that makes such a big impact in how a person is experiencing the service. And then there's stages of change. So this is a model, it's a theory, and essentially it says that people go through 5 distinct stages in making any type of behavioral change. So there's pre-contemplation, that's before you have any sense that there's anything that you want changed. And then contemplation, you have a realization of there's an area you want to make a change. Preparation is when you make a plan. Action, that's when you start taking actual steps, and maintenance is when you have accomplished your goal and you're maintaining it. And this is a really important model and framework in More Than Food. And we can apply this model to our work with Pantry clients. There are opportunities, and particularly in the context of connection, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, there's opportunities to help people set and accomplish goals and their own personal goals that they have for themselves so that we see sustainable life change. But this model also can be applied to pantry staff as they consider more than food and some of the changes that you might like to make in your programming. Okay, now with connection, this is our third C, supporting clients in setting and meeting goals by connecting them to needed community resources that foster individualized growth. And so we recognize that people come to food pantries. First, of course, they're seeking food, but as staff and volunteers create a really strong program culture, they build relationship, they build trust, and they really get to know a person's story and life situation. And most often we find that there are needs beyond food. And a pantry alone, they can't meet all of those needs, but what they can do is help connect people to other services, other providers in the community that can help to meet those needs. And there are all different expressions of connection. So I'm going to share some examples or some things that we have seen pantries do, but I want to just let you know that there are so many different ways this can look in different contexts. Some things, though, that I think are just important across the board, having staff and volunteers that are knowledgeable about community programs and resources so that when a question is asked, they are able to make a strong connection. Having information about community programs available on site. And we have this concept that we call warm referrals. And a warm referral is not just telling a person, hey, here's the program, go and call and make the connection on your own. It's helping and supporting them to make that connection. So it might be making a phone call with them or helping them to schedule a first appointment, but really walking alongside a person as they do connect to those programs.
Jess, do you want to just call out some of these examples that are not necessarily local, but even ones that likely have counterparts around the country?
Like 211?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are some community programs or even referral sources, ways to connect. 211 is a great example. It's in most states, and a person can call or go onto their website and help connect them to whatever the type of program or service is that they need. SNAP is another. There's some that are offered. Some programs are more specific to state support, and there's some that are offered across the country. And so with connection, we have what we call wraparound services. And these are services and support that are brought on site to the pantry. And you see in the images, the purple tablecloth, that is a resource center. And you see how it's a table that's set up and it has printed resources available for people to go and take home with them. And that's a great start, but how much stronger is it when there's a relational interaction? And so we see the picture next to it where you actually have a staff or volunteer who's sitting with a person, and that's another resource center at a different program, and they have a computer where they have job searches or people can apply for benefits. Um, and so the more relational we can make the connection, the stronger it is. The other thing that we've seen in some of our programs here in Connecticut, but in other states as well, is using space on site at the pantry to offer workshops or classes. And in some situations, a program may have a staff or volunteer who's trained to be able to offer a particular workshop or class on a topic relevant to the people that they're serving. In other cases, as Katie said before, partnerships within the community are so important. And so a pantry might develop a partnership with, say, a GED program who's willing to come and offer programs on site. And so those are just some of the different expressions of wraparound services. And then we have what we call coaching. And so coaching, I just want to start by saying it's more than just a referral, it's a relationship. So at a resource center, you could sit with someone and you could offer a warm referral where they now know about a new program in the community. With coaching, it goes deeper than that. A coach walks alongside a person as they take steps towards their goals and supports them in a whole bunch of different ways. A coach helps a person to focus on the areas of their life where they would like to improve. They collaboratively develop a plan or strategy for accomplishing the goals. And what's important about all of this with coaching is that the coach is not ever telling the client what they should do or what their goals are. It's a real collaboration where they're drawing out of that person what they want for themselves and simply supporting them and taking the steps that they already want to take. And so they develop a plan. As we talked about before, connection. They help connect them to resources in the community that are going to help them accomplish their goals. And this is really important because it's not just practical, but there is a real supportive aspect to coaching. A coach points out a person's strengths and celebrates their successes with them. This makes such a difference. We know that accessing services and taking steps towards goals, it's challenging and sometimes it can be very discouraging. And so when you have a person who's pointing out your strengths and celebrating your successes, it makes it much more likely, as the last bullet says, helping them to overcome challenges. It makes it much more likely that they're going to keep taking steps even when they face a challenge or a barrier. And we found that coaching is a really powerful strength-based relational intervention that we've seen success at pantries. And finally, motivational interviewing. And with motivational interviewing, it's an empathic and relational approach that helps a person to move through the stages of change. And so if you remember the slide, has a couple slides back there, we talked about stages of change and that people, and anytime there's behavioral change, they walk through certain stages in a certain order. Motivational interviewing, it's an approach, it's a set of skills, it's a way of being that helps a person to move through these stages. And I'm sure we've all had the experience of setting a goal. Maybe it was a New Year's resolution, and you are so sure that you're going to accomplish it and take steps, and then you don't. And that's it's very natural. We all have resistance towards change because change is scary and it's new. And so motivational interviewing helps a person to work through that resistance so that they are able to take the steps that they want to. And again, it's not just a set of skills, It's a whole set of values, a way of thinking about people and services. And so motivational interviewing is person-centered, it's strength-based, it's meeting people where they're at, it's non-judgmental, it's empowering, and celebrating the small steps. That's so important. We want to encourage people with every step that they take, and it builds capacity. And we have found motivational interviewing goes hand in hand with stages of change. So I would recommend any sites that are offering coaching would have their coaches trained in motivational interviewing. But in Connecticut, we've also found that this, because it instills values, this is a great approach for any staff or volunteers to be trained um, in the context of any expression of connection, whether you're at a resource center, whether you're a coach, whether you're sitting with someone making warm referrals. Um, so I'd like to, at this point, pass it over to Jennifer Kruger from the Johnny Cake Center in Rhode Island.
Thanks, Jess. First, I just want to say over 130 people took time out of their day, and I know what kind of work you do because I'm boots on the ground just like you. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to think about how you could make your program better, because I know the struggle, and we really want to just give you these resources to help this pay off and to help you bring your program to the next level, which is probably why you're here. So thanks so much for having me here to talk about More Than Food. I'm the Deputy Director at the Johnny Cake Center for Hope, which is located in Peacedale, Rhode Island. And we cover a good portion of Southern Rhode Island with our services. So I'll tell you a little bit about our agency, kind of our history, and how we started to roll out some More Than Food kinds of approaches. So the agency, the Johnny Cake Center, has been around since 1974. It was born the same year as me, so it's easy for me to remember. And when it started, it was really just a bunch of community members who realized that there were folks who were food insecure in their community. And they wanted to do something about it. So they got together, they formed this small pantry. They eventually added a thrift store so they could offer clothing resources to folks and also generate some income to help them make sure they had the food that they needed. So they had donations of food, but also a little bit of money to help with programs. And that model lasted for quite a long time. That was really the main model that existed even when I started about 6 years ago at the center. And just to give you a little sense of the community itself, because I know you're probably coming from all over the country, small pantries, large pantries, agencies that have other services. We are we help about 700 or so folks every single month. And we serve a lot of households in the area, but we are a very diverse part of the community. So although South Kingstown in particular is probably 90% white, the population of folks that we're serving are 1 out of 5 folks have some Native American ancestry. We are seated on the homeland of the Narragansett tribe and the Niantic tribe here. We have all kinds of diversity within our group. 1 in 5 folks are seniors that we serve. About half of the folks that we help are in households that are 1 or 2 people, but we also serve big families. And so we're really seeing this just wide range of folks that we're serving. But we're also seeing some of the healthcare disparities and the challenges that people face. So we're an affluent community, and some of the challenges that people face are sort of hidden. Their neighborhoods are hidden, or just their challenges in general are sort of hidden. You wouldn't necessarily know that folks are struggling. So that's just to give you a sense of where my lens is coming from. So as I said, we had the food pantry. I started at the agency about 5.5 years ago. And at that time, we had also gotten a new executive director. And I think, the 2 of us who were probably the primary social service and leadership staff at that point, both felt like there must be more we can do. And that was really about the 3 C's, right? It was about wanting to give people more choice, wanting to have more connection, wanting to have a culture of just helping and really understanding the folks that we were working with. And I would say, you know, if you take one thing away from this today, really try to understand the needs and goals of your visitors. That can really shape the small steps that you take that may lead you to really big holistic change. I think that was a really great learning experience for our agency. You know, we had a lot of agreement between visitors and ourselves about things we wanted to add, but there were also surprises and things we might not have thought were priorities. But working on those with community members who felt like they were priorities really established an amazing level of trust that we were in this together. So just wanted to kind of make that as a side note. So as we sort of came into the new era of the Johnny Cake Center in the last 5 years or so, we've had some great opportunities. The Fresh Start coaching program was offered to us through the Rhode Island Food Bank. We had a grant come through for community health outreach. So we were able to hire another person. So I did coaching half-time, and another person was doing community health outreach in some of the neighborhoods where folks were having the greatest health disparities. And those were really great opportunities for us to spend this in-depth time trying to understand you know, what people wanted to work on to better their lives. And as we say in this business, just working upstream. So instead of just saying you have a crisis, we fix your crisis and we'll see you later, we were thinking, well, what can we do so less people come to us in crisis? Because sometimes you can be more preventative and try to work on some of those things. So yes.
If it's okay with you, there have been two great questions that came in that I'm thinking it'd be easier to do in real time while you're
Yeah, absolutely.
Rachel and Jennifer were asking how you mentioned getting feedback from your visitors. Can you just describe a little bit about what the process was that you did that? Was it surveys, conversations? How did you get feedback from folks?
So a little bit of both. It's probably been almost 5 years since we did our first fairly large survey. We had a annual Thanksgiving distribution where nearly all of our families would show up on one day. And we took advantage of that opportunity of seeing so many people on one day to have volunteers stationed with a survey. And we did a quick 10 or 15-minute survey with folks as they were entering the line to grab all of their items for Thanksgiving and move along. So that was one thing that we did. And then there was certainly, you know, if you remember that change circle that we saw earlier in the presentation, when I was doing coaching, when my colleague was doing community health work, and really just anytime someone came into the office for help, we asked a lot of questions. And we also were on that journey with them to find resources. So we were learning a lot. Number one, what are people coming in for? That, you know, housing is a huge issue in our area. And we know that because 1 out of 2 people who came in, probably the whole time I've worked at the agency, have asked about housing. So we knew that was an area where the agency, whether it was through advocacy or direct help, maybe should try and support. So those are definitely things that were easy to do in terms of trying to address the needs. But I would say a focus group, you know, just talking a little more to your visitors, a survey. There's actually a lot of different ways you can do it. And some of that might depend on the size of your organization. You feel like I covered that, Katie? Okay. So as you're sort of thinking about this journey for your own organization, one of the frameworks that we've been using at the Johnny Cake Center more recently is this idea of health and wellness, and how do we want to promote health and wellness in general. And so there may be one of these areas where you feel like you're already naturally positioned to do more. And that would be another way to sort of think about what's the small change that your agency can do. Is there something you can do with the human capital resources you have, right? It's really about people power in our organization. So what skills, tools, ideas do the folks that you're already working with in your agency and even your visitors have? Could you offer more in the physical realm of wellness? Could you help people have better environmental conditions or advocate for that? Are there financial ways that you could help people, either with helping them learn to manage their money better or help them when they are in a crisis. That is something that our agency expanded over the last 3 or 4 years, and we were able to get more grant money to help people when they had to fix their car or pay their rent. And those things, again, if you eliminate that crisis, you can work on some of the longer term goals with folks that they might want to work on. Helping people with their jobs, with social, emotional, and that can be as simple as the culture change you have in your organization to make people feel really welcomed and understood and heard when they come to your agency, or it can be more than that. It can be creating community connection through a task force, through a support group, through, just more friendly interactions happening with the community of people that you serve. And then, of course, intellectual would include education, continuing education, opportunities for kids in the education system, things like that. So you don't have to do all of them. We talked about this as we were getting this seminar together. Don't be alarmed by these lists. Use them as an opportunity to think about the strengths within your own organization. So social determinants of health is a lens that the Johnny Cake Center uses a lot when we all think about our work. And that really just means where you live, work, learn, and play. And it's used a lot in community health work now. And the reason that we talk about this so much and that it's sort of like a hot topic at this point is, as you can see, I highlighted in the graphic, and this is from NeighborWorks America. They have some really great materials if you're interested in this topic, that 80% of an individual's health is determined by their behaviors and the social and environmental conditions in which they live, work, and play. So you can see that 20% of clinical care, that's going to the doctor, having a procedure done, managing your health condition. But really, the reason we're having a seminar like this today is because agencies like ourselves have a lot more of a role to potentially play in people's health and wellness. So again, this is not saying that any one person or one agency would ever be able to really address all of these things. But it's a good lens. It's just a good way to sort of keep in mind how much of a role we can play in supporting people and improving their health and wellness. So this graphic, I think, is helpful to me when I explain how the Johnny Cake Center has gone from, in the short time that I've been there, a food pantry with a thrift store, to really almost a community development organization. And that really started with the agency having a long history of caring about the individuals in our area and making sure that they had their basic needs met. And that was really sort of our foundation. But as we had more resources and opportunities to explore coaching, community health work, really getting the neighbors together to talk about what was happening and why our services were needed, we were really able to move more into that realm of social determinants of health. And that's why I put in the bullets, ask your visitors what they think is important. And I saw somebody had commented about the idea of what words we use with the folks that are coming to visit us. That was really important to me when I started at the Johnny Cake Center, and actually we most of the time refer to our visitors as members. I think that that's an unusual choice, but it's also a choice that suggests we're actually part of a community that's working together. And that's very much true for the folks that give us lots of feedback, may use our services, but also give us lots of feedback about their community and their neighborhoods and what more we can do to make them better for everybody there. So we've been working on a lot of those things, and I'll explain some of those in the next slide. But I also want you to just think about, are there advocacy opportunities that your agency or some of your volunteers could work on? Is there a healthy housing or income discrimination bill that's going through your state? Is there some other way that you as individuals in your organization could support your community? So it's definitely not one size fits all. And it definitely has to make sense for your particular organization and the way that you run. Some pantries are all volunteer and on a shoestring budget, if any. And some food pantries are in very large organizations where there might be more that you can do in-house. But all of these things, helping individuals, working in the community itself for change, and working on the larger systems that impact everybody, those are all things that you can engage in on, in one way or another. And now to just overwhelm you with things that you could do or could refer out to and partner with other people in your community. This is a list of things that has grown over time at the Johnny Cake Center. The ones with the asterisk, we have either collaborated or partnered or referred out to another agency to get support on these. So you can see, maybe half of these are really in-house, and they're mostly developed and facilitated by our staff and volunteers. And about half of these, we've found community partners to help us with them. And I may or may not list everything because it's so many, but we did have a lot of visitors who wanted weekly produce in the summer. And we have community farms in the area that will donate their overage to us. So it was not that difficult for us to find a way to offer extra produce in addition to regular shopping to encourage people to eat those items that they might be afraid to buy at the store if they were going to go bad because their kids wouldn't try rhubarb or Brussels sprouts. We were able to offer those things. And then we had a great resource for cooking classes to teach people how to cook with olive oil and have meatless meals. And again, gave out groceries for those so that people didn't feel like they had to go to the grocery store and risk buying whole wheat spaghetti and then not use it, right? So there's lots of ways you can sort of incentivize adventure without fear for the folks that are visiting you. And then we found another amazing organization that was already running classes for elementary school aged children to increase their physical activity and just their awareness of sort of eating healthy foods and having less screen time. We've been able to partner with them to offer those services directly to our Johnny Cake community. And then all of the things that many social service agencies might do. Healthcare navigation, finding a good doctor, finding new housing, getting some help with that car repair or some other crisis that's happened. Free tax preparation, we decided to jump into that when the IRS asked us a few years ago. Job search, continuing education, certainly through coaching, I was able to do that really in depth with folks. Goal setting and coaching, myself and the community health outreach worker are able to do that. And then I would just want to take a pause. I know I'm getting close on my time, but just to give you a sense of how all those little things can lead to something really amazing. That frankly, if I started 5 years ago and you told me we could be where we are now, I'm not sure I would have believed you. But that group of 10 grandmas and moms mostly who started coming to our leadership task force started out by asking if we could talk to the Boys and Girls Club in a neighboring town and bring in some after school programs and some free summer camp for their kids. And we were able to do that. And then we worked with them more and they said, we don't feel like we're treated the same in the schools because of our address or because of our background. Can you help us have a more in-depth conversation with the schools? And we were able to get a grant to have a facilitator work with our leadership group and the school district over several sessions and really work through some of those challenges and really think about system change. At this point, there's a BIPOC advisory board for our school system that's really helping them look at policies and curriculum in a way that they haven't done before. And that is certainly in part because of our leadership task force. And then in the last couple of years, some of our grandmas and moms decided they would run for office. And we ended up having one of our grandmas be the first woman of color on the local school committee. We have a person who's on the Housing Authority Board. So we have somebody who used to use subsidized housing, doesn't anymore, but she's now a person with lived experience who's on that board. And we had another parent who joined the Affordable Housing Committee in town. So, you know, you don't have to do anything that big. You don't have to think that big when you start. You might be surprised that those conversations you have with people could lead to something like this. So I think what we're trying to tell you today is put your foot out there, give it a try, see what you can learn from the folks that you're working with, who their lived experience will really inform the way that you can shape your future at your agency.
Well, I don't know if people aren't inspired at this point. I don't know what else to offer. That was fantastic. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jess. Keep adding some questions in the chat box if you have them. We'll definitely have some time at the end. I have a couple more slides to run through to summarize this paradigm shift for food banks and pantries. When we think about the work we do, we usually think about providing basic needs. We're providing emergency short-term food supplies. We're focused on pounds of food. We're focused on efficiency. One thing that I've heard, particularly from a lot of food banks within the Feeding America network, is we want to shift from basic needs towards ending hunger and helping people become employed and stable and having, you know, good physical and mental health, be self-sufficient. We want to shorten the line. But many food banks and pantries are struggling. Well, that seems like this huge step to go from one to the other. And the way that I would describe it is more than food will help you get there. So just as Jen was describing and Jess reinforced, it's about relationships. So building relationships with the people that you serve, the people who are visiting and shopping in your food pantries, building relationships with other community partners to build those strong, warm referrals. Getting ready as individuals, helping the individuals that we serve get ready for change, helping as organizations to get ready for this bigger work. Focusing on goal setting, coaching, it builds in towards advocacy and tracking outcomes is the sweet spot to get there. We're going to do some more intense webinars and trainings in the near future where we'll go more in depth about if you want to get started with coaching and offering motivational interviewing. Those are longer trainings that we'll go through. This is just, meant to be an overview. And so here are some ideas of logistics that really the most important ingredient is the commitment, is having buy-in from staff and volunteers about this bigger picture of the direction you want to go, of moving from a short-term supply of food towards longer-term systemic change. If you're going to offer choice, oftentimes that's changing the layout within your pantry. Culture can involve training of volunteers, small changes with the layout, other avenues for focusing on a welcoming culture. And then within connection, there are different logistical steps that you can take, and we'll go through some more steps. There isn't an easy step-by-step manual that we can provide for all of these because it really takes creativity. It's going to look different in your community than it might in another community. And that's a beautiful thing because then you're going to respond to the needs in your community. I can't leave you here without telling you about my new book. If you don't know already, I recently wrote a book about many of these concepts. And it's called Reinventing Food Banks and Pantries. And I'm hearing from other food banks and pantries around the country that are finding inspiration in the book, and it makes me really excited. If you want to order a book, you can go through Island Press, my publisher, put in my last name, Martin, for 20% off for the paperback copy. I want to let you know too, they're doing a sale this week for ebooks. So if you want an electronic copy of the book, they have it this week through Friday for $4.99. I mean, that's a bargain. So order a copy of the book. And we've got our contact information here. Should you want to reach out to any of us, we welcome your thoughts, questions, comments, and want to go back to an early question from Conchia Fleming. How would you approach staff who has been at a facility for several years and is resistant to embracing this type of change? Being empathetic, providing choice, utilizing cultural humility. It's a great question. And the slide that Jess presented on stages of change, typically we think about that for individuals in a coaching session of helping them become more ready to make change. But it's really, really powerful for organizational change as well. I guess my suggestion would be show these PowerPoint slides. We're going to share these with all of you after the webinar. We have other resources that you can look at. I think it's starting the conversation and talking about the longer term impact that you can have with individuals. But Jess or Jen, I wonder if you guys have other suggestions for building readiness for change at the organizational level.
I'd be happy to jump in on that because we certainly have had to do it over the last 5 or 6 years, especially when we changed our sort of model of service. And I think, there are different approaches you can take with volunteers and staff. You can talk about how this is really a change that's happening in the entire, if you want to call it industry, or in the entire, realm of food, that no one just talks about food anymore. It's just not how it's done. So that's one option, is to sort of just blame it on the world. The world doesn't work that way anymore, and we have to catch up with the way the world is doing it. I think, another way to talk about it is to try and have your volunteers and your staff reflect themselves on why they started this journey of being in this kind of helping profession. I think that's a really helpful place to start. You came here because you wanted to help the people in your community, right? And what we know from research and from what people have been doing out in the field is that if you really want to help, then we have to do things that are more than food. And that's how you make a difference. So if you dream that someday the person who comes to see you every month won't come to see you, you have to start workshopping how you can be a part of that solution. So I think that's a good way to start, because it communicates the culture shift, if it is a shift, or it just recommits to that culture that you want in your pantry or agency, and that you want in your community, which is, these are our neighbors and our friends, and they're people that we see at school and at the grocery store. And we want to help them with more than food. We want to help them have better lives because they're our neighbors. It's really hard for someone to fight you on an argument like that, I think. So it's a good place to start. You'll still have some struggles when you change routines, because it doesn't matter where you go, there's going to be some people who are overwhelmed by changes in routine. And I think you roll those out, you see who can roll with the change, and you might lose a few people. I'm going to tell you that's okay. The people that you lose maybe just aren't ready for this more than food strategy. They're not ready for things to change. And they may have some things they need to think about themselves in terms of what their approach to helping is. So the majority of folks will be super excited if you start them on this journey.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'll mention also that, or Jess, go ahead.
I agree with everything that everyone said. The only thing that I would add is, so at Urban Alliance, we're a capacity building organization. And so we have, over the last, 7 or 8 years, we pulled together program staff who are doing similar work. And we call those learning community meetings. And we found that when staff from one program hear stories from staff from at another program about what they're doing and how excited they are to see the impact of their new efforts, that's been just really powerful. And we've even had staff from one program, just because they come together and build relationship, visit another program. And that process has also helped in kind of people moving through the stages of change, as Katie said.
Yeah. One other thing too, what might sway folks is we have evidence that shows this works. So as you look to other funding sources, funders want to see outcomes. They want to know that their money is going to good use. And so, it can help you raise more money. How about that for an incentive? Jen, Christy asked, with your leadership team, did you offer incentives or payment for their time?
So we typically didn't offer incentives except that we had childcare and food because, we're working with a lot of, single parents and folks who have kids. So those task force meetings were largely heads of household who had families. So we held them in places like a school after school hours where we could have the basketball gym and the library, or the basketball gym and the music room. So we had a room for the parents. We had food because that is the great unifier, right? And then we had a place with paid childcare. So we did invest in having childcare available. That was nice for the kids because a lot of them knew each other and they got to sort of hang out. It was a break for the parents. So instead of being another thing they had to cram in, it was actually time for them to be with other adults who understood what they were going through. And so when we started, in some ways it functioned more as a support group and a place for them to hear that they weren't alone in the experiences that they were having in the community. And I think that gelled for them. And then to have us as people from the agency saying, we're going to take time out of our Thursday night, and we want to sit here with you and hear what's going on, like, what do you really need? That was really powerful. So I realize that's not going to work for every single agency, but it definitely was extremely helpful in informing us and creating priorities for growth.
That's great. There's one other question. Magdalene said, was the conception of these programs, did it come from the feedback loop? I think the idea of this type of work, it comes from various places. Sometimes it's coming from the food bank that then tries to recruit food pantries to offer more than food. Sometimes it's the director of a food pantry who says, we want to do something different. Sometimes it's the staff within a food pantry that then raise it up to, the food pantry leadership. I think it can come from different avenues, but it typically comes from the same place that we've described of there must be more that we can do beyond short-term supplies of food. I think we're close to time, and you can see our contact information here. We're really happy to follow up with you if you've got other questions. And Brittany had listed the survey that we would love for you to fill out so we can know how we're doing, what we can do differently, how we can improve, and any other comments you have. So please fill out the survey if you would, and hopefully we'll see you on a future webinar in the near future. So thank you everyone for your time. Have a great day. Be healthy, be happy. See you next time.